in September of 1963 to October of 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald is supposed to have gone to Mexico City. This is a huge rabbit hole I could talk a little bit more about.
Okay, if we're not going to talk about it, can we definitely come back to that?
Oh yes, we'll cycle back very shortly,
okay.
right?
All right, just I don't want to bury that one.
Right,
That's
no,
good.
it's huge. So he is supposed to, or an imposter, as I'll get to, is supposed to have visited the Soviet embassy and the Cuban consulate down there, supposedly to get to Cuba. And so this would, under even normal circumstances, if you and I did it, would set off some red flags. So the CIA has stations all around the world. The Mexico City station, they write up to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. They say, we got a guy here who is wanting to go to Cuba and maybe Russia during the height of the Cold War. Do you have any information on him? Is he, because we want to find out if he's, up to no good, if he's a spy, what have you. And the CIA writes them back in Mexico City. CIA headquarters writes back to Mexico City Station, says, we have barely anything on this guy. He defected to the Soviet Union a while back and came back with a Russian wife. But really, we have nothing about him doing anything since that point in time. And as of now, we're talking like it's maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs. So that's that. And so the Mexico City station doesn't take him, again, depending on who you believe, doesn't treat this visit with a nearly amount of urgency that you would if you also found out that when he went to the Soviet Union, he is purported to have alleged to want to threaten to give away secrets, and he had worked at the U-2 spy base, which is our most secret held spy equipment at the time. Having worked there, he threatened when he defected at the American embassy in the Soviet Union to basically give that information to the Soviets. He came back, yes, with a Soviet wife, which should be
red flag.
Right? How did she get back here? And then, and this is the real key that they left out, he didn't just go into a hole for 2 years. He, on and off again, was engaged in pro-Castro situations, in ongoing communications with the Soviet embassy, with people back in the Soviet Union that it may have been innocent, but if you're the Mexico City embassy and you know that a defector to the Soviet Union in the height of the Cold War came back after having threatened to give away secrets, was hostile to the FBI, that was in the records when they tried to interview him, and had maintained...
Wait, when did they try to interview him?
So, well, there's 2 elements to that story. They should have done an official debrief. They did that to thousands of people who did not threaten to give away military secrets when they defected, right?
Yeah.
Right? They did not supposedly do that with Lee Harvey Oswald, they being the CIA. And so now you have a group of people who say, well, that's a sign that he must have been a spy or they would have interviewed him. But then there's another group of people who say they probably did interview him, but then the question becomes, well, then why wouldn't they admit it? That would have been a normal thing to admit. It maybe would have caused people to go look at what he said, right? Which also could be because he was a spy. But the CIA headquarters knew a lot about Lee Harvey Oswald from files that were circulating to them from the FBI. And we know that because we have to the point with Newman, we have routing sheets where people are receiving the records that say all of this about Oswald, all the way up to within a few weeks of his going to Mexico City. So they claimed the latest information they had was this little bit of information up to May of 1962. They had plenty more. We're talking documents that were dozens of pages, all the way up to the weeks before he came, when he was arrested, by the way, for distributing pro-Castro material.
Yeah.
And all of that was left out of the information that was sent to Mexico City. We only know that because of the routing sheets. And because of those routing sheets, we have to ask the question, why would CIA headquarters present a false and incomplete picture to their own people in Mexico City? And it doesn't have to be speculation, because Newman and a reporter for the Washington Post, who does a lot of work that we could talk about related to the Kennedy assassination, former reporter for the Washington Post now, named Jeff Morley. They went and found the people who signed off on those documents that claimed there was no up-to-date information. And one of them was a woman by the name of Jane Roman. She was a career counterintelligence officer, and she was long retired by this point. But when they confronted her with the material and the routing sheets...
When is this, approximately?
When they confronted her?
Yeah.
They confronted her in 1994, 1995. This is when the files start to first leak out from the... Not leak, but be released by the review board that we were talking about. And when they show it to Jane Roman, she says, well, it looks like I'm signing off on something that I know to be untrue, right? But that's not the craziest thing she says. Next thing she says is, look, I had nothing to do with all the Cuban hanky-panky, which is a reference to the fact that we were trying to minimally sabotage and almost definitely assassinate Fidel Castro. It's not even a death. It's no question asked. It's just a matter of how often we tried, right?
Yes.
Rather haphazardly, but we were trying. And she said, but when they asked her, how would you interpret all of these documents together? This is a career CIA person, right? This isn't like this isn't like, Matt Gaetz or somebody in weaponization of Congress or something. This is a career CIA person. She says, well, the best interpretation I can give is that this particular wing of the CIA, this compartment, they're highly compartmentalized, it's called the Special Affairs Staff. We're running an operation involving Lee Harvey Oswald. This is 2 months before this guy is accused of killing the President of the United States on a strict need-to-know basis. And Mexico City, the people in Mexico City Station, did not need to know. Now, that's what happens when you get a full blast of all of these records. None of it explicitly is Kennedy assassination related directly to Dallas, but it sure raises a serious question. If she is right, then why would the CIA be running an operation involving Lee Harvey Oswald 2 months before the assassination? This is where you can get into my interpretation of it is.
And that is?
I believe that Lee Harvey Oswald, first of all, I believe that Lee Harvey Oswald, and this is something that's very frequently, I think, ignored in all sorts of assassination and political assassination investigations. I think he was a human being with his own motives and agendas. He was not just a complete dupe that was almost a robot for some agency.
Meaning he had very... let's say the attitudes he had towards like communism or towards United States policy were real.
I think they were largely real. I think in his own mind, he was a leftist. Now, when you read his actual readings, it's like anarcho-libertarian. It's a real weird kind of conglomeration of ideas. In his own mind, he was a leftist.
Okay.
But what he really was, something he actually had in common with JFK, he was obsessed with the allure of the spy world. They both loved James Bond novels. Right? When Kennedy famously wanted to badly meet Ian Fleming, the author of James Bond novels. Oswald read those novels vociferously. And not just those novels. His favorite show going up was The Man Who Led Three Lives, a guy who was a triple agent. It was a TV show. And so I think he was motivated by that kind of sort of mystique. I think he was a leftist in his own mind. I think that explains a lot of the contradictions in what you see in terms of the behavior. But I also think people who could figure that out were capable of manipulating him. And so I believe that Oswald was on the periphery of intelligence operations ever since he went to the Soviet Union.
Why would they... Here's what I can't wrap my head around. If he gets on the map, so to speak, in Mexico City...
I think it was just before, but go ahead.
Okay. So he gets on the map there, though, where he gets questioned by... Did you say it was the FBI who questioned him?
That's who questioned him when he got back from Russia in 1961.
Okay. Meaning there is now, and I'm thinking like a spy, let's say he's an asset, right? And let's say that I'm a spy who is looking to use him in some sort of plot to kill John F. Kennedy. He now has a file why would you put him in, like, why would that not remove him from the plot? Because now there is a paper trail that one day will completely lead back to him because there was a red flag flown on him 2 months before.
So the file we have, the explicit file, explicit, paints a picture of a lone deranged defector to the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. You have to dig really deep into things like what John Newman does. You have to put together routing sheets and chronologies. There was no expectation in 1963 that anyone would even have access to this stuff, much less be able to put that together. And so, and it's still controversial. You know, not everyone buys into Newman's interpretation of A and B, right? But that's the big thing, is that the argument, and I agree with it, that somebody like Newman makes is, what's going to be removed from the files is anything explicit. You're going to have to go 2 to 3 levels deep to even figure it out. And there's, in fact, there's no way for them to get their fingerprints off of any of this to that extent. They could get rid of all of the explicit stuff or choose not to release, per the Biden decision, all of the explicit stuff. And at the time in 1963, no one thought a former military intelligence officer was going to have access to thousands of top secret documents and be able to weave together the story.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.